On August 3rd, 2010, President Obama marked the Fair Sentencing Act enactment that constrains the solid compulsory lease sentences for low-level crack offenses that bipartisan pioneers concur were excessively unforgiving and unfair. The new law altogether decreases the cocaine condemning amount difference from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1 by raising the amount of crack important to trigger the 5 and 10-year obligatory lease sentence originally set in the year 1986. The enactment likewise takes out the obligatory lease for basic ownership of crack. The bill went collectively through the Senate and by voice votes with little restriction in the House of Representatives. The change marks progress towards guaranteeing reasonableness and proportionality in government condemning in fields where required lease sentence has not been wiped out since the 1970s, and bipartisan consent to lessen punishments, especially for tranquilized offenses, is uncommon. As presented, the Reasonable Condemning Act arrangement could have totally wiped out the condemning uniqueness among break and powder cocaine, and its effect in decreasing racial dissimilarity and developing government imprisonment rates would have been more emotional. The Sentence Legal Executive Advisory Group considered the span of the bill brought about the 18 to 1 trade-off and at last passed to Congress, which means crack sentences are presently multiple times harsher than the powder cocaine sentences instead of multiple times. The new law does not have significant bearing to those as of now indicted. Thus, an individual is as of now detained or anticipating sentences for crack offenses submitted before establishment won't advantage from the progressions to the required essentials. While changes made by the Reasonable Condemning Act are significant, the first concerns communicated by advocates in regard to the intemperance of disciplines for monetary low-level crack offenses, and the kept condemning the similarity between the two types of medications continue as before. In addition, the huge racial dissimilarity in government penitentiaries will proceed. Presently, crack got common during the 1980s, got broad media consideration due to some extent to its exponential development in the medication advertised. The prevalence of crack was related with its modest value, which just because made cocaine accessible to a more extensive financial class. Open worry about crack compulsion is going with brutal medication markets spread rapidly. Commentators using words like emergency and scourge, which was later demonstrated to be overstated to depict the effect of split utilization. The medication was viewed as a social threat more risky than powder cocaine in its mental and psycho effects. The political agitation that resulted drove Congress to pass the Counter Medication Misuse Demonstration of 1986. The laws required punishments for crack offenses were the harshest at any point embraced for low-level medication offenses and set up radically extraordinary capital punishments for split and powder cocaine. Under the subsequent law, respondents indicated that only 5 grams of cocaine, the heaviness of under 2 sugar bundles, an amount that yields around 10 to 50 dosages, were dependent upon a 5-year required lease sentence. A similar 5-year punishment was set off for the offer of powder cocaine. Just when an offense included 500 grams, 100 times the base amount of first split, which is around 2,505 and 5,000 dosages. Correspondingly, while the offer of 500 grams of powder a pound of powder, which can yield up to 50,000 dosages, recommended respondents to a 10-year sentence. A similar compulsory sentence was set off by selling just 50 grams of split, which produces around 100 to 500 dosages. In the year 2009, this compulsory condemning structure brought about normal sentences for crack offenses that were more than 2 years longer than for offenses, including powder cocaine. Presently, on the Reasonable Condemning Demonstration of 2010, respondents in candidate for a crack offense will currently need to have at any rate 28 grams contrasted with the past 5 grams to get a 5-year obligatory lease. To trigger the 10-year compulsory lease requires a crack amount of 280 grams. Amount triggers for powder cocaine offenses continue as before. The basic belonging obligatory lease for first-time offenses disposed of under the change of President Obama. First-time basic ownership of any amount of crack like powder cocaine will bring about a sentence no longer than 1 year. Beforehand, an individual indicated in government court of basic ownership of 5 grams of break was dependent upon a required 5-year jail term. Starting in the year 2008, the National Study on Medication and Use of Well-Being started watching a decrease in utilization of break. In spite of fears of certain rivals, a reasonable condemning act, split use has kept on disappearing since the hatchet entry in 2010. The overview found in 2010, 1% of the study's respondents has utilized crack. In 2013, just 0.3%, and now utilizing split.